I never planned on noticing her. It just sort of happened in the same way you notice the first leaf to turn red in September. You're not looking, and then suddenly you can't unsee it. Most afternoons I'd stop at the same coffee shop, the one that always smelled faintly like old wood and cinnamon. It wasn't special. Just convenient. I'd sit near the back, plug in my laptop, and pretend to work while mostly staring at emails I never sent. She was there more often than not. Mid-40s, maybe older. Always with a notebook open, pen resting just above the page like she was waiting for words to arrive. She wasn't loud, wasn't the type to draw a circle of attention around herself. But somehow she made the whole place quieter, like everyone else's volume turned down a notch when she walked in. The first time we spoke, it wasn't really speaking. She was in line ahead of me, and when the barista asked for her order, she said, "Just black coffee." No hesitation. No sugar, no milk. I must have smirked, because when it was my turn, I repeated the exact same words. She glanced at me then, not smiling exactly, but something close. That became our joke, or maybe just mine. Weeks later, when I ordered something different, she looked over from her table and raised an eyebrow. "Already betraying your brand?" she said. Her voice was soft but carried, like she was used to being listened to. I laughed more than I should have, folded my napkin into smaller and smaller squares just to keep my hands busy. I didn't know much about her. Only pieces. That she sometimes stayed long enough for her coffee to go cold. That she had 2 different sets of keys on her chain, one heavier than the other. That she wore her wedding ring on some days, not on others. And I noticed things about myself when she was around, too. How I typed slower, more deliberate. How I kept glancing toward her hands, the way her thumb tapped lightly against her pen even when she wasn't writing. It wasn't attraction, at least not in the way movies like to frame it. It was quieter, heavier. The way silence feels heavier when there's someone else in the room. One evening, just as I was packing up, she spoke again. "You're always here around the same time." "Yeah," I said. "Habit, I guess." "Habit," she repeated, like she was testing the word against her teeth. Then she nodded, almost to herself, and went back to her notebook. That night I almost texted someone, an old friend, my sister, I'm not sure who. I typed out, "Do you ever meet someone who feels familiar?" but deleted it before I hit send. When I walked back into the shop the next day, she wasn't alone. Another woman sat across from her, similar eyes, sharper laugh. Sister, I guessed. They were mid-conversation, papers spread across the table, when she noticed me standing in line. She didn't wave, but her eyes followed me all the way to my seat. Later, as I zipped my bag, I heard her voice again, low, direct, but meant for me. "Close the door, now it's just us." I looked back, half expecting I'd misheard. But her sister was gone. Only her notebook remained, and her eyes waiting on mine like there was something she hadn't yet decided to say. The next time I saw her, the air was damp with late rain, and the windows of the cafe fogged easily. She sat in her usual corner, notebook closed this time, palms wrapped around a mug of tea. No black coffee. I almost walked past, but she glanced up, and that was enough. I sat at the table beside hers, close but not facing. "You changed your drink," I said. She looked down at the steam. "Couldn't sleep last night. Tea feels safer." I nodded, unsure what else to add, until she asked quietly, "Do you ever get nights like that?" The question felt heavier than it sounded. I wanted to answer honestly, but words came out uneven. "Most nights," I admitted. "I just don't usually say it out loud." Her hand shifted, tracing the rim of the cup. She didn't press me, just gave a small sound that wasn't quite agreement, wasn't quite sympathy either. Something in between. A few minutes passed like that. The kind of silence that doesn't demand filling. Then she surprised me again. "My son's about your age," she said, voice flat, almost careful. "He doesn't talk much to me anymore. Not the way he used to." I couldn't tell if she meant to share that, or if it slipped out. She caught herself, eyes flicking toward me as if to measure my reaction. I swallowed, fingers tightening around my cup. Maybe he doesn't know what to say, I offered, though the words felt thin. Or maybe I don't know what to hear, she said, half to herself. That stayed between us, heavier than the steam rising from our drinks. I thought about her son then, whoever he was. Thought about the fact that I was sitting across from his mother, listening to things I wasn't sure I should be allowed to hear. The age difference, the unspoken gap between us, pressed closer. Still, I didn't move. Instead, when her pen rolled off the table, I reached to catch it. Our hands brushed, a soft accident, but it lingered a fraction too long before I let go. She smiled faintly, like she'd noticed but wouldn't name it. "You're observant," she said. "Not really," I replied, embarrassed. "Just easier to notice some things than others." Her laugh was short, quiet. "That sounds like an excuse." We sat there until the rain slowed outside, the cafe emptying one table at a time. I told her about my apartment across the hall from a woman who played piano every evening, how I waited for it without meaning to. She told me about a trip she almost took years ago but didn't, because life pulled her elsewhere. Small things, but each one felt like a thread laid down between us. When we finally stood, she reached for her bag and touched my arm lightly, just enough to steady herself. Maybe unnecessary. Maybe deliberate. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. For a while, it became a rhythm. Not planned, not promised. Just expected. I'd find her at the cafe, or she'd appear when I least thought of her, and somehow the air bent differently when she was near. But one evening it shifted. I got there earlier than usual, laptop already open, headphones around my neck but not playing anything. She walked in, hair damp from the drizzle outside, shoulders set like she'd been carrying something heavier than the weather. She spotted me. Paused. Then, instead of sitting across, she chose a table further away. Close enough to see, far enough to feel the distance. I waited. Pretended to read. Sipped my coffee too quickly. 10 minutes passed before I gave in and stood, walking toward her. "Busy tonight?" I asked. She looked up. The hesitation in her eyes was quick but sharp. Then she forced a smile. "Something like that." I nodded, pulled out the chair across from her, but didn't sit until she gave the slightest tilt of her head. Permission, or maybe resignation. The silence between us wasn't the easy kind anymore. It pressed. It questioned. Her phone buzzed on the table. She flipped it over without looking. The gesture said more than words. "You don't have to." I started. "I know." She cut me off, then softened. I can't always explain." I didn't push. But the doubt crept in anyway. What did she want from me? What did I want from her? The barista interrupted, calling my name for a refill. I stood, almost grateful, but when I came back someone had joined her, an older man in a gray jacket, leaning against the chair like he belonged. A friend? Her husband? I couldn't tell. She introduced us briefly, voice polite but distant. He shook my hand, too firm, his eyes lingering a moment too long. Then he left as quickly as he came. When he was gone, I almost asked. Almost. But her hands stayed clasped around her cup, knuckles pale, and I knew the question would break something fragile. Instead, I sat. And we talked about nothing. The weather. A book she said she'd half finished. The new pastries the cafe was trying. Words that didn't matter but filled the space. Still, her foot brushed mine beneath the table. Once. Maybe accidental. The second time, definitely not. I looked up. She met my eyes. Didn't look away. The air thickened. My throat caught. I thought she might lean closer, or maybe I would. Her lips parted, just slightly, like the start of a confession. And then the door opened. A gust of cold air. A group of people laughing too loudly. The moment slipped. We both sat back, almost in sync. Her hand went to her cup, mine to the folded napkin I'd been twisting apart. We didn't speak of it. But I carried that almost kiss home with me, Heavier than anything we'd said. It was late, later than usual, when we left the cafe together. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick, shining under the street lamps. Neither of us had said we'd walk the same way. We just did. Our steps echoed too loudly, too evenly. She carried her bag against her chest, like a shield. I shoved my hands deep in my pockets, fighting the urge to say something that would tip us off balance. Halfway down the block, she stopped at a bench under the awning of a closed bookstore. "Sit with me a minute?" she asked. I did. The quiet stretched. She watched the traffic light change from green to yellow to red, though no cars passed. I watched her. Finally she spoke. "You know, whatever this is, it's ridiculous." Her voice wasn't sharp. Just tired. "You're 20-something. I'm not. I should know better." I opened my mouth, but nothing formed. She kept going, words spilling but measured. "Sometimes I think I just like the attention. That maybe you remind me of a version of myself I can't get back." A pause. "Or maybe I'm selfish." Her hands twisted in her lap, fingers tightening, releasing. I wanted to stop her. Or let her finish. I couldn't decide. "It's not," I started. Stopped. Tried again. "It's not just that." She turned then, really looked at me. Eyes sharp, searching. "Then what is it?" I swallowed. My throat dry. "It's the way you listen. The way you make silence feel like something instead of nothing." I laughed once, nervous. "I don't get that from people my age." Her face softened, but her jaw stayed tense. "That's not enough," she said quietly. "Maybe it is," I said, though even I didn't sound convinced. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, pulsing with everything neither of us could afford to name. A car drove past, tires hissing on wet pavement. When it was gone, the world felt smaller again, just a bench, her breath, mine. She leaned back, exhaled. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I'm not asking," I said quickly. Too quickly. My pulse jumped. "I'm just here." Her hand rested on the bench between us, close enough that the warmth of her skin brushed against mine in the cool night air. She didn't pull it back. For a second, I thought she might lean closer. Or maybe I would. The question hovered there, inches between us, heavier than anything we'd said. Her eyes flicked to my mouth. Just once. Then away. And in that moment, just before something irreversible, I realized the real question wasn't whether I wanted her. It was whether she'd let me. For a week, she wasn't there. No black coffee cooling on the table. No notebook balanced on the edge. No half smile when I walked in. Just empty space where she used to be. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Different schedules. Bad timing. By the fourth day, I stopped pretending. I found myself checking the door every time it opened, rehearsing the way I'd nod if she walked in. Casual. Like I hadn't noticed she'd been gone. But she didn't. On the seventh night, I saw her by accident. Not at the cafe, outside near the grocery store, her cart half full with the kind of things that looked like planning for someone else: frozen meals, extra cereal, too many paper towels. She almost didn't see me. When she did, her whole body seemed to tighten. "Hi," she said, voice clipped. "Hey." I tried to sound normal. "Haven't seen you around." She hesitated, eyes darting to the side. "I've been busy." A pause. "Family stuff." That word landed heavier than she probably meant. "Family?" Before I could ask, a voice called from behind her. A young man, older than me but not by much, walked up with another basket. He looked like her, same eyes, sharper jaw. Her son. She introduced us quickly, her hand barely brushing my arm as if to steer me away. He nodded, polite but detached, before turning his attention back to her. I wanted to stay. I wanted to ask her what she wasn't saying. But she gave me a look that ended it. Not angry. Just final. Later that night, I sat in my apartment with my phone in my hand. I typed out a message. Are you okay? Deleted it. Wrote another. I didn't mean to intrude. Deleted that too. The words didn't fit. None of them did. The next morning, I went to the cafe. Sat in our corner. Waited. Her seat stayed empty. I told myself I wasn't heartbroken. That would have been too dramatic, too easy. No, I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. When I finally left, I glanced back at her chair one last time. The mug she usually held, the notebook she always left slightly open, it wasn't there. Just wood grain, worn smooth by strangers, and the faint smell of cinnamon. And for the first time since I noticed her, I didn't know if I'd ever see her there again. I didn't plan on knocking. I was only passing her building, hands in my pockets, rehearsing nothing in particular. But the lights were on in her kitchen, and the shadow of her figure moved against the curtains. Before I could talk myself out of it, my knuckles hit the door. She opened it slower than I expected, hair tied back, sleeves rolled above her elbows. No makeup. Just her. For a second, she looked like she might close the door again. Then she stepped aside. Come in, she said. The kitchen smelled faintly of ginger tea. A single mug sat on the counter, steam curling in the air. She gestured toward the table, but didn't sit until I did. We stayed like that, two people pretending they weren't counting heartbeats, for longer than made sense. Finally I said, I haven't seen you. I know. She rubbed her thumb along the handle of her mug. It was easier that way. Easier for who? I asked before I could stop myself. Her laugh was short, humorless. For both of us. You're young. She shook her head. I can't rewrite what's already been written. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. I don't care about the numbers. I care that I broke off, the words too heavy. That I notice when you're gone. She went still, eyes fixed on the steam rising between us. Then softer. You shouldn't. Not me. Her voice cracked just slightly on me. I wanted to reach across to close the distance, but I didn't. Instead, I said, maybe I don't get to choose. The silence after that wasn't comfortable. It was raw, stretched thin, like one wrong move would tear it. She set her mug down carefully. Do you know what I'm risking? My son finding out. People asking questions. Me realizing I don't know what I'm doing. Her honesty was sharper than anything I'd expected. But it also opened something. I'm not asking for a promise, I said. Or forever. My throat tightened. I just don't want this to end without saying it mattered. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the mug again. Then, instead of lifting it, she let her fingers rest against mine on the table. Not a grip. Not even a full touch. Just the weight of skin against skin, tentative but real. I exhaled, slow. Didn't move. Didn't need to. She looked at me then, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. Okay, she whispered. Not a confession. Not a solution. But something true. And for the first time, it felt like enough. Time didn't stop for us. It never does. The cafe became less of a stage and more of a habit again. Sometimes she arrived first, sometimes I did. We never set a time. We didn't need to. By some quiet agreement, we'd end up at the same table, two mugs cooling between us, hers tea now more often than coffee, mine whichever I felt like ordering. The barista stopped asking if we wanted separate checks. Her son came by one afternoon, waved to her from across the room, then left without staying. She didn't flinch this time. Just breathed, slow and steady, like she'd accepted that some distances take longer to close. We took walks when the evenings allowed. Past the same bench by the bookstore awning. Once, I stopped there out of instinct, and she smiled faintly. Not tonight, she said, though she brushed her hand against mine as we kept walking. That was enough. At 8:47 a.m. one weekday, my phone buzzed. No words, just a photo, two mugs on her kitchen table, steam rising in different curls. I stared at it too long, smiling at the simple proof that she thought of me in the middle of her routine. I sent back a picture of my own, black coffee balanced beside my laptop. No caption either. None needed. The pauses between us had changed. They weren't heady anymore. They felt lived in, like silence had become its own kind of language. A look across the table said more than a dozen explanations. A touch at the doorframe on my way out carried the weight of things we didn't have to confess. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even always easy. There were mornings when she canceled, nights when I wondered if I was asking too much of her without asking anything at all. But then there were moments, small, ordinary, unremarkable to anyone else, that anchored me. Her laugh when the pen slipped from her notebook. The way she leaned against the counter while waiting for the kettle to boil. The simple, grounding warmth of her saying, "Tea?" as if the offer itself carried more weight than the drink. And so we kept going. No declarations. No grand plans. Just something that grew in the spaces between us, quiet but steady. Looking back, I can't mark the moment when I knew we'd chosen each other. Maybe it was on that bench. Maybe in the kitchen. Maybe in every glance we let linger a second longer than necessary. All I know is this: life didn't forget to finish the sentence after all. It just wrote it in smaller, quieter lines than I expected. And we learned how to read them. Together. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?